To become truly great, one has to stand with people, not above them.
Charles Louis de Tocqueville, more commonly known as Montesquieu, reminds us that true greatness is not found in rising above others, but in standing with them.
The health of a democratic society may be measured by the quality of functions performed by private citizens.
And Alexis de Tocqueville takes it even further, telling us that the health of a democracy is measured not by its leaders alone, but by the actions of its citizens. Taken together, these ideas reveal something essential. That strength is not hierarchy. That responsibility is not optional. And that the survival of any meaningful system, whether a nation, a community, or even a life, depends on participation, quiet participation, honest participation, daily participation, not above, but with. Welcome back to Hope is Kindled, the podcast where we walk together through stories and philosophies that shape the spirit, challenge the mind, and nourish the soul. Today's episode takes us into the realm of ideas, into the writings of two towering figures of political thought, Charles Louis de Tocqueville, Baron de Montesquieu, and Alexis de Tocqueville. These are not novelists. They didn't build fantasy worlds like Pratchett, or write soul-bearing memoirs like Elie Wiesel or Gandhi. But what they gave us, structures of thought, systems of liberty, and visions of society rooted in virtue, have shaped the modern world in ways that still ripple through our laws, our lives, and our longings for a better future. We'll look at their ideas, their times, and the hopeful lessons they offer for those of us trying to walk through the noise and confusion of modern life with clarity and compassion. Born in 1789, Montesquieu lived through a period of immense political upheaval in France and Europe. He was a nobleman, a satirist, a lawyer, and above all, a believer in liberty through structure. His great work, The Spirit of the Laws, proposed something revolutionary when he said,
Liberty is not chaos. Liberty is balance.
Montesquieu introduced the idea that a government must have separated powers, executive, legislative, and judicial, so that no single group or individual could dominate the others. Sound familiar? It should. The framers of the United States Constitution were deeply influenced by his ideas. James Madison, John Adams, and Thomas Jefferson all drew directly from his work. Montesquieu taught us that virtue is required not only of the people, but of the system itself, that government must not merely be efficient, but ethical, not simply powerful, but accountable. In the Iliad, we saw how unchecked rage led Achilles down a path of destruction. In 1984, we saw what happens when power consolidates into the hands of the few. Montesquieu, writing a century earlier, warned us about both, and he offered something rare, a blueprint for moderation.
Liberty is the right to do what the law permits.
In a world obsessed with extremes, Montesquieu's vision reminds us that hope often lives in moderation, in the quiet strength of fair systems, steady laws, and respectful dissent. Almost a century later, another French nobleman would set sail for America. His name was Alexis de Tocqueville, and in 1831, he toured the young United States, supposedly to study prisons, but in truth, to understand the great experiment of democracy. His reflections became Democracy in America, published in 1835, one of the most prophetic and humane works of social observation ever written. De Tocqueville was not blindly idealistic. He admired the promise of democracy, but feared its weaknesses. He warned that tyranny could emerge not from kings, but from conformity, that a democratic majority could become a mob, that equality, left unexamined, could flatten the soul instead of freeing it.
Americans are so enamored of equality that they would rather be equal in slavery than unequal in freedom.
Like Orwell's 1984, de Tocqueville's warnings are about how freedom can erode slowly, not through violence, but through distraction, laziness, and unchecked populism. But de Tocqueville wasn't a cynic. He saw hope in local communities, in civil society, in people organizing around shared values. He admired the American town meeting, the volunteer fire brigade, the churches and clubs and unions that taught responsibility and care for others. It's the same hope we saw in the Count of Monte Cristo, when Edmund Dance survives not through vengeance alone, but through connection, love, and purpose. De Tocqueville believed the antidote to apathy was participation.
In democracies, nothing is more great or more brilliant than a well-organized society.
And that's the gift he gave us, the reminder that liberty is a shared task, and it begins not in grand speeches, but in small, daily acts of decency. Both Montesquieu and de Tocqueville were aristocrats who turned their eyes toward the people, not to rule them, but to understand them. Their gift is their refusal to idealize or demonize. They trusted institutions, but not blindly. They trusted the people, but never unconditionally. In other words, they trusted in the potential of humanity, but only if guided by conscience. This puts them in the same spiritual league as Gandhi, who believed in nonviolence not as pacifism, but as moral strategy, as a form of governance for the soul. Or Dickens, whose novels cry out for social reform through compassion, not revolution. Or Harper Lee, who showed us in To Kill a Mockingbird that justice begins with integrity in the home. Montesquieu and de Tocqueville offered no miracles. They were not saints, but they were watchmen, and they called us to be the same. They remind us that fantasy, like in Pratchett or White or Cervantes, may clothe the truth in satire, but these thinkers reveal the truth in structure, and in that structure, we find hope. Because if we can imagine a world where laws are fair, where leaders are humble, where people talk to each other across differences, that's not escapism. That's the hard, slow work of building a better world. In this podcast, we've explored works that expose injustice and others that inspire transcendence. Montesquieu and de Tocqueville sit uniquely between these extremes. They don't offer drama. They offer discipline. They're not lightning. They're the wires that carry it safely to the ground. And that's the kind of hope we don't often talk about. Quiet hope. The hope of procedures, of debate, of listening, of compromise. The kind of hope that says, let's not destroy it. Let's fix it. Montesquieu said,
"A nation may lose its liberties in a day and not miss them for a century."
This hope, this slow hope, is what holds democracies together. It's what held Odysseus to his mast, what held Pip to his conscience, what held Chief Bromden to the memory of his father. And maybe it can hold us too. There is, however, a caution running beneath all of this, quiet, but unmistakable. Montesquieu warned us that systems must restrain power. De Tocqueville warned us that people must restrain themselves. But history adds something even more sobering. Even the best systems depend on the character of those who inhabit them. In a reflective letter on George Washington, written by George W. Bush, there is an emphasis not on Washington's victories, but on his restraint, on the fact that he gave up power, that he stepped away when he could have remained, that he chose limits when he could have chosen control. And that is the caution, because Montesquieu can design balance, de Tocqueville can describe participation, but neither can guarantee virtue. Washington understood something essential. A republic is not sustained by rules alone. It is sustained by people willing to honor limits. And when that willingness fades, when ambition outweighs restraint, when ego overrides responsibility, when power becomes something to keep instead of something to steward, then even the strongest structures begin to erode. Not all at once, but gradually, quietly, the same way Tocqueville warned, the same way Orwell imagined, the same way history has shown us again and again. This is what makes this episode not only hopeful, but cautionary, because the system works only if we do, only if we participate, only if we question, only if we restrain ourselves where the law cannot, only if we remember that liberty is not something we inherit once, but something we practice daily. So, as we close today, remember, not all hope is fire. Some hope is stone, steady, enduring, built one thoughtful law at a time, one ethical citizen at a time. Read the spirit of the laws, read Democracy in America. Read the thinkers who remind you not only to dream, but to build wisely. And when you do, ask yourself, what kind of world are we constructing? Because every rule, every story, every act of kindness is architecture for tomorrow. Good journey.